I think, and it sounds cliche, but knowing that you are not alone, they did not create the term gaslighting in Wikipedia because you're the only one, right? Like, so many people are going through this. And the more connected you can be and finding the people that understand what you're going through, that you don't have to defend yourself over and over and over, that can be one of the most healing things for you.
Hey, I'm Brooke Jean, therapist, recovering perfectionist, and struggling working mom on a mission to normalize normal. If you're an overwhelmed, high-achieving, and secretly anxious mama, struggling to balance it all and on the brink of burnout, you are in the right place. Here is where we talk about hard things like balancing work and family life, mental health, and how to navigate life-altering transitions. Nothing is too taboo here. In my conversations, I'll teach you how to let go of who you think you're supposed to be in order to create the life you've always wanted. Get ready to embrace your messy, shed the shoulds, and find freedom through a life unperfected. This is the Unperfected Pod. Welcome back, everybody, to the Unperfected Pod, where we normalize normal and find freedom through a life unperfected. I am thrilled and honored to have a friend and a colleague on the show today, Sybil Cummin. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, you guys, we are going to be having a very real and honest, vulnerable, difficult conversation today because the work that Sybil does in the world is really big and important. But before we jump in, I wanted to share with you guys her bio and a little bit of background around the work that she does. So Sybil is a licensed professional counselor and approved clinical supervisor specializing in working with survivors of domestic violence and narcissistic abuse, including the youngest witnesses. She specializes even further by focusing her work with survivors who are experiencing abuse post-separation and abuse in our family court system. She created the Rising Beyond community and the Rising Beyond podcast to offer hope and strategies for healing from abusive relationships and offers training for other mental health professionals on working with this population. So excited to get into it. So Sybil, can we just start with telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and I'm curious, how did you get into this specific niche, this really important work that you're doing in the world?
Yeah, it's a different story than a lot of other therapists and therapists that work in this area. I am not a survivor of domestic violence or narcissistic abuse. I went into this field wanting to just work with kids. Like, I want to work with kids all day and play, and that was it. And every arena or environment that I worked in, there was a dynamic that I couldn't quite put my finger on. So I worked at Children's Hospital, I worked at an agency, and then in private practice. And the dynamic was domestic violence and narcissistic abuse. And so I saw it initially through my kids that I worked with, and, saw the quote, and I always do my air quotes for high conflict divorce, right? Because a lot of these families are who I work with their children. And so I started seeing these dynamics and kind of the power and control of one parent of the other. I was contracted with the Department of Human Services here in Child Protection, and I just got deemed like really good at working with DV. I don't actually know what that means, in honesty, but people just were like, Sybil's really good with DV. But I didn't, we're not trained in graduate school on working with this population at all. I think I had like 30 minutes in a family issues class or a couples issues class, and it was like, if there's domestic violence, don't do couples work. And that was it. And so I had to learn from my clients. I had to learn like from advocates, reaching out, reading, doing the things. So I had to learn on my own. And when I started seeing what was really happening, especially in our family court system, I could not, right? If I don't understand something, like, why aren't we putting children's wellness first? Like, what on earth? Like, what? I just can't not, like, do something And so I started really, really specializing in that post-separation abuse and working with protective parents and adult survivors, along with my child survivors as well.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. How do you become the go-to person for DV? I mean, that's says something, right, about the strength that you have, the boundaries that you have, the awareness you have. That's a lot. So I think for the listener who is new to some of these terms, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's DV, domestic violence, or narcissistic abuse, or just narcissism in general. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions out there around what that actually is. Can you shed a little bit of light on, what is narcissism or narcissistic abuse? And then we'll kind of go into what are some red flags or warning signs that we can be paying attention to. Because this is a topic that has a lot of shame and people don't talk about because it doesn't feel safe and okay to talk about. So let's kind of start with the basics if we can. What is narcissism? What is narcissistic abuse?
Yeah, so narcissism is thrown around left and right, like, oh, they're a narcissist, they're a narcissist. And there actually is a mental health diagnosis that is narcissistic personality disorder. And so what I'll talk a little bit more about that, but your partner doesn't have to meet criteria for narcissistic personality disorder to cause a lot of harm and to be really abusive. And so, narcissism is really, looks like they have a really grandiose sense of self and self-importance and entitlement. They really do need constant admiration and ego stroking to feel good. They will exploit other people in order to move further or to reach their goals. So their needs are always going to be more important than everyone else's, and they don't typically care what they have to do to get there as long as they reach their goal. So that's where a lot of that harm comes in. They can be really overt. So if most people, if you think of that overt narcissist, it's the one with like the nice car, they're at the gym taking their, selfies of their muscles in the mirror. Those outside things are the most important things, and how they look is important. Who they have around them is important. So that's kind of that overt narcissism. But what we find, especially with covert narcissists, they are really hard to spot. So that covert narcissism, a lot of times they're not focused on their outside appearance as much, their physical appearance, but they might need to be the smartest one in the room, that everyone else is super dumb, they know better always. And then with both of them, there is this, they need to present the picture of the perfect relationship, the perfect family, the perfect, to everyone on the outside, because then that allows them to harm people within that relationship. So if on the outside it looks really perfect, it's much harder for their target to get help because no one could believe it. So whether they meet criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, which is really non-changing. So that's the really sad and hard part, is when people are with with somebody and they love them, they really believe that this is their soulmate, and this is not changeable. Out of really anybody, they're the least likely to go to therapy with the goal of self-change. They might go to couples therapy, which is a whole nother topic, but that will not be fruitful for you. They will kind of take over that narrative in a couples therapy session. It can actually be more harmful than good to go to couples therapy with someone with high levels of narcissism or who's abusive.
Yeah, so it sounds like this external facade covers up this internal almost monster, right? That they are to the people that they can control or that they quote unquote love. What are some of the ways that harm shows up in relationship, in families?
Yeah, so when we talk about narcissistic abuse, I always say, so a lot of people will subscribe to the term narcissistic abuse because they don't subscribe to the term domestic violence. And not all perpetrators of domestic violence are narcissistic. Some of them just really have zero skill when you think of the physical abuse and things like that. But all narcissistic abuse is domestic violence. Because they're using, because, we have this misconception of like a victim of domestic violence looks like a low income, low education, young female, a bunch of kids, low skill, perpetrators, blue collar, right? That's what people think domestic violence is, and that's not at all. It does not discriminate based on education or socioeconomic status or race or somewhat gender, but just that misconception makes it so hard to say, oh yes, I'm a victim of domestic violence. But narcissistic abuse is domestic violence because the goal is to gain and maintain power and control over their intimate partner, over their children, so that they can do what they wish and so that they can keep kind of moving up in the world, whatever that looks like for them. And so it may, start out with kind of that lower level emotional abuse where they will make jokes and then say you're too sensitive. And then that kind of grows and grows and grows. Probably the most common symptom of behavior that is highlighted in narcissistic abuse is gaslighting. And so for you to not believe your own reality and to doubt everything that you know, doubt all of your experiences, that is the goal of someone with high levels of narcissism. Because if you're doubting yourself, then they control the show, basically. So that is really, really almost like the hallmark of, and then that mask that they wear to the outside public, they wore for you as they courted you to hook you in and to get you kind of stuck in their grasp.
Okay, and this is kind of a random question, and maybe there isn't just one simple answer. There usually isn't when we're dealing with human beings, but how long does it take for a narcissist to show their true colors, right? So if they're charming in the beginning and they hook you in like they do everybody else and they've got this facade, how long does it usually take for them to start down the path of controlling and that emotional abuse and things like that? Or is it all over the board?
I think it is all over the board timeline wise, right? They can only hold their shit together for so long, honestly, but the whole process is abusive. So what starts the abuse, the more abuse that is tangible is when you have made a commitment to them. So this could be moving in together, getting engaged, having a child, getting married, any of those big commitments. They will likely have the mask on and be your soulmate. And I say that, somewhat facetiously, be your soulmate until there's a big commitment made. And so that could be because these relationships typically move fast because they can't hold their shit together that long. So they may say they love you within the first 2-3 weeks of being with you. Oh my gosh, you're my soulmate. I've never met anyone like you. Let's move in together. And 6 weeks later, you move in together. They've got you. Or that you get engaged really quickly, or they really kind of pressure you to like go elope. Right? Like, let's get married. I love you that much. We're going to be together forever. And so that commitment, once that's made, that is when things usually shift. The mask shifts off more because you'll see it, in the beginning a little bit. They might be talking trash about the waitress or talking bad about this person or that person. And they'll say, I had a really rough day at work. And you're like, yeah, everyone has a bad day. And so once there's that commitment made and you've told everyone how amazing this person is and that they're your soulmate, it's really hard and really shameful to say, oh my gosh, I was scammed.
I was
wrong. Completely scammed. I was wrong. He is horrible or she is horrible. But things will change, right? So it's like, nope, I can save the day. I can save them. I can be better. And then things will shift. I'll do this better. And then they'll shift. And so that, back to the original question is once the commitment is made, that is typically when the abuse starts.
Okay, so we are starting to talk about some warning signs, some red flags that you're falling into this trap that they've created, right? So I heard you say the love bomb. Is that what love bombing is? When they're just like showering you with attention and affection, and I love you in the first couple of weeks, and I see a future with you. Is that what love bombing is? Can you clear that up for us?
Yeah, so the kind of definition is really about that, doting on you and taking you to nice places that you wouldn't be able to maybe go, giving you gifts, all of that. That doesn't fit for everybody, but really it is that the mask where they are going to really pay deep attention to you, and it will seem like they are really listening to everything you're saying, and they are, because they are going to model or mirror your value system so that you really do feel like, oh my gosh, I found my person. And so if you're interested in climate change, they're interested in climate change. If your first car was a Honda, their first car was a Honda too. Oh my goodness. And so all the things that you care about, they seem to care about as well. And so they are going to be showering you with things. It may not be like gifts. They may be posting on social a song, and it's like, oh, this reminds me of you, babe, or something like that, because they need to put out this persona, and you need to be like, oh my gosh, see, he's so amazing. So it is that love bombing to make you feel so safe, to make you feel like they are your person, they are the forever, and they will paint that picture of forever.
Yeah, I feel like now that I have some awareness around this, I can start to see it, right? In my own relationships and just in general. But I want to remind the audience right now, like, I feel like as women, as mothers, we've been pulled away from our own inner knowing and our intuition. And like, if something in your gut is telling you like it's too good to be true, or something feels off, or a facade, or something, like, listen to that, right? If it feels too good to be true, listen to that calling. But I'm hearing love bombing, things moving really quickly.
Yes.
That facade, that mental manipulation of we're the same and we're meant to be together. And then wanting to kind of get you, right? And then there's a shift. Are there any other warning signs or red flags that we can be paying attention to that's indicating we're on the slippery slope into an abusive relationship, or we're already in the abusive relationship? Get out, get out, get out.
Yeah. So some of the things that you might not think to pay attention to because it feels so good to be listened to, but how much do you know about this other person? They don't often share a ton about their life with you. They very rarely have good, close friends because they can't do that. They don't really have that capacity for that give and take. They don't have the give. They don't have the give and take, and they don't have that level of empathy. And so they very rarely have close friends. So they will have maybe even long-term friends, but it's very surface level. So that's something to kind of pay attention to. If you are, you get that gut feeling of like, oh God, this is moving so fast, and you try to slow things down, that will cause what probably feels like or looks like anxiety in the relationship because they need the hook. They can only do this so long. And so that, that's one of the things. And I think how they talk about other people is really important to notice. Do they feel, and this is like staff places, right? Or, like the waitress, the receptionist, the whomever, how do they talk about them is something really to listen to. And then, yes, those internal red flags of like, my gut is telling me something, like I feel really uncomfortable and I'm going to excuse it. So those internal red flags are really, really tricky too. And then when you're in it, the trickiest thing is that gaslighting is really to take away your sense of self and sense of knowing. So if you start questioning yourself all the time, and you used to be like, wow, I used to be able to make really quick decisions, or I really felt like I was good with money, but now I'm being told that I'm irresponsible with money. Or if what they're telling you is completely opposite of what you believe about yourself, that's something to really look at. And then a couple other things. Do their stories make sense? Do their stories change? If, they talk about their college roommate here, but then later it's like a college roommate is someone different. Is it real? And then, that sense of confusion. If you feel really confused about the relationship, where you stand in the relationship. It's something to really listen to.
Yeah, I think two of the things that you said are really important to pay attention to in terms of if you're trying to figure out if you're in an abusive situation, if you're totally confused and parts of your sense of self are chipping away.
Yes.
You're losing who you are. You're losing confidence. You're losing personality styles. You're losing belief in yourself. Guys, these are some red flags and some warning sign that something's got to hold. But I know that when we're talking about navigating relationship, leaving relationship, co-parenting with an abuser, it's really important that we navigate that mindfully and carefully, right? There's this misconception of, oh, you should know when you're in this abusive relationship and you should just get out. And that is not at all how it is.
No.
What steps can you give us? And I know it's a much deeper conversation, which is why I really want to, if you believe that you might be in a situation like this, please listen to Sybil's podcast or join her community, because she goes into the depths to guide you. And this is not something that you want to do alone, right? But
yeah.
What are some steps that are safe that mamas can take to start to backpedal and get out of an abusive situation?
Yeah. So one of the things that happens within these abusive relationships is you are typically really isolated from your safe people. And that is because those safe people are your avenues out. And so in some way, reconnecting with any safe people that you have disconnected with, or maintaining that connection, can really be your lifeline to getting out. If you are physically safe and your children are physically safe, then you have time to plan. And so planning, as quietly as you can, and this is really tricky, is once you realize you're in an abusive relationship, how do you stay in it and act the same so that they don't know something's up? So that piece is really tricky, but can be really, really helpful. You know how to stay safe. I know that sounds crazy when I say those things, because it's like, wait, no, you're in an abusive relationship. You're not safe. You know how to stay alive. You're here. You're right. Your responses have done what they need to do to keep you here. And so trusting that to keep you safe, and then accessing outside help. So your local domestic violence agency, to find an advocate, they can do individualized safety plans with you. A therapist that knows about abusive relationships can help you safety plan and plan to get out safely. Really doing a lot of learning, like so much education on it, which can be really overwhelming because there's so much out there. But if you know what to expect when you leave, you will be in such a better place, right? There's this belief, another misconception of that, it's easy to, just leave. It's not easy to just leave. But then there's this other misconception is once you've escaped, you're safe. And you're not. If you share children with an abusive partner, you're not safe, because there's this new monster that is post-separation abuse that will likely occur. Just because you've left, their desire for power and control over you hasn't ended. They still want that. And you leaving is a really big, we call it like a narcissistic injury. So you exposed something in their world that is not okay, right? So their ego is completely bruised and busted open, and they will do anything and everything they can to put that back together so that they present in a way that they're not the problem, they're not broken, it's all you. And so, again, kind of just knowing what to expect is one of your best options. And again, if you're not physically safe, you grab your stuff, grab your kids, and contact your local domestic violence agency. Like, get out safely. That's the most important thing, is your safety. We can figure everything else out after you're safe.
Yeah. I think it's important to know what the resources are locally in the community, because I think you don't know, right? It's like, if I'm ready to leave, maybe I've even saved up a little bit of money, but it's like, and then what? Don't do it alone. Reach out to these agencies, because those advocates are well versed in this work, or, you know, Sybil in her practice, well versed in this work. But now transitioning into the actual, what do you call it? It's post-separation
abuse. Yes.
So what are some things that, if you are getting out of this relationship, that you can be aware of or plan for? What is it like to co-parent with these people?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So co-parenting is not a reality if you have an abusive ex-partner. That's what the court is going to want you to do, so you're going to use that language. You're just going to use the language because that's what people want. But what is best is parallel parenting. And so you're going to parent how you're going to parent in a way that you want to do it to keep your babies resilient and safe. And there's not going to be collaboration and with this other parent. They're going to use all the different ways of post-separation abuse to cause havoc in the world. So something you can do, if you have the ability to plan your leaving, I would say one of the most important things you can do is document. Start documenting. Don't use your journal, your personal journal, for other reasons. Like, you don't want your personal journal subpoenaed into court, because then they can read anything they want in that personal journal. Mm-hmm. So having just like a separate planner or a separate notebook that you're starting to document incidents, you're taking screenshots of pay stubs, of taxes, of the financial things, because they will not be honest with the financial things. If you're going through a divorce with someone like this, you're taking pictures of holes in the walls. You're taking pictures of all your things. And it feels gross because the majority of women who are in these relationships are not manipulative people. They have high levels of empathy. They want to work on themselves. They will give people the benefit of the doubt. So oftentimes when I start talking about this, it feels gross. It feels yucky. Like, who wants to take screenshots of bank statements? No one. But you need to have that data, and that you need to have the information, and that will protect you later. And so documenting is one of the most important things you can do as you're heading out the door, because it will protect you later. But what post-separation abuse can look like is there will be some sort of smear campaign. They're going to talk to anyone and everyone about how horrible you are in whatever way they choose, which you can actually predict that to some extent. What is the stuff they've said in the relationship? They're going to say more of that, but bigger into everyone else.
So what's an example? Like, give us an example of that.
Yes. So that you are, right, like financially irresponsible might be one, or that you're mentally unstable. And so they'll even reach out to like joint friends or joint people and be like, you know what, I'm so worried about Sybil. I think she is really anxious and depressed, and I'm worried she might hurt herself. Can you check in on her? And so this like person, maybe in your, house of worship or family friend or whomever it is like, oh my gosh, I'm so worried about her now. So then they're going to be like the flying monkey, which is like a helper. So if you know the Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West had her flying monkeys that did her bidding. So this is going to be an unaware flying monkey that's going to check up on you and go report back to your ex. So those are the things that they might pull out. They're going to smear you all over the place in court. I had this belief before I knew what I know now, that if you lied in court, that you would get in trouble. There was like perjury. Not in family court. They're going to lie left and right and nothing happens. Take it to mean like, well, everyone lies in family court. Guess what? My people never lie. My survivors don't lie, because they feel like if they tell the truth, people will see it. And that's not always the case. So yeah, they're going to smear you. I know with regard to children, because your audience is mostly mamas, they will counter-parent. So if, say you've been vegan your whole life, you've raised your children vegan, and now they're going to, you have two separate homes and they're going to dad's house. He introduces meat into their diet, even though he was totally on board, right? Totally on board. And then he's going to send you in your Talking Parents or co-parent messaging app all these articles about how vegan children don't get enough protein or something like that. And so they're going to start introducing meat into the diet. You know, what do you feel comfortable with them watching on TV? They're going to maybe do something different. You think that piano is really important. They're going to not bring them to piano. So that's counter-parenting. And then the piece that's really scary in these situations is that you have been like the buffer for abuse. And so your children are safer, right, when you're present because you can take it, or you know how to do the thing so that your children aren't harmed. And now you're sending your kids to their other parent's home without you. And so that can be really, really scary, because will the abuse move to your children? And so that is what scares so many of my mamas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let's talk about some things that mamas can do to navigate the messiness of that, right? Because it's like, if there's physical abuse, it's obvious, and Child Protective Services comes in. When it's mental and emotional and psychological, which is very typical with the narcissistic personality disorder and the narcissistic abuse, it's not as overt. It's not as obvious, but you know how damaging and harmful it can be. And so as a mama, you're scared, you feel helpless, you feel hopeless. And by nature, you just want to do the right thing and co-parent, but you cannot co-parent with someone who doesn't live in reality. And that's the thing I really want to highlight for our listeners is, like, if you're banging your head against a wall because you're not getting anywhere with your ex when it comes to co-parenting, it's not you who's doing it wrong. You cannot have productive and healthy conversations with someone who doesn't live in reality and is serving a completely different agenda, which is why you're talking about parallel parenting. But how do we, as a mama who has to share my children with someone like this, how do I take care of myself? How do I navigate this? Because I can't imagine how scary and hard that must be.
It's the scariest thing, I think, that the survivors I work with go through. And so the first thing is, if at all possible, getting the children in to see an expressive therapist. And the reason why an expressive therapist, and what I mean by that is play therapy, art therapy, music therapy, some sort of expressive way, not just talk therapy, because there will be this idea that you go to family court, your partner is going to say that you're coaching. They are going to do that. And they may be the ones coaching or trying to coach, right? But if they're in an expressive therapy, it's really hard. So I'm a play therapist by training. It's really hard for a parent to know how to tell their child to play with me in a way that shows whatever, right? So if a child comes in, they're 6, and they're like, my dad touches me inappropriately. And I say, gosh, what is that like? And they're like, I don't know. I think he touches me inappropriately. That's coaching, right? They wouldn't tell their child to come in and play with dolls a specific way, or to use phallic objects, or to do these things to babies, or to, like, you can't coach play therapy.
Got it. Okay. So when you say coaching, you mean they're priming the children to go in to represent them in a positive light to the therapist. I mean, this is how layered the manipulation goes, guys. So they're prepping the children to come in and accuse mom of something, or, but when it comes to play, they cannot coach their kids how to play. Children innately play the way they play, but in their play, they're demonstrating what they're going through.
Yes. Yep. And so if you can get them into an expressive therapist, often an abusive partner will not sign consent for your children to go to therapy, because I'm scary, right? Like, I have to call child protection. I could be subpoenaed into court. I'm a scary person to someone who is abusive. And so with that, I always recommend going to your pediatrician and sharing your concerns. Not, I think dad is this, XYZ. It is, my child, we're going through a huge transition. My child seems more anxious. They're not sleeping well, whatever it might be. And your pediatrician will say, oh, well, here's a recommendation that they go to play therapy. And it's really hard. So even if your ex-partner is not going to sign consent at that moment, a judge is not going to be like, oh, that doctor's stupid, we're not going to follow a doctor's recommendation. And so that the pediatrician is your number one, like, next step in that case. So getting them therapy, getting you therapy, because this is horrible. And you need to present in like this business-like manner in communication with your ex-partner so that you don't get dinged as high conflict in court, like so that you're showing consistency and you're showing health and wellness on your side so that they can't use that narrative that you're the abusive one or you're crazy or you're this. So you need a therapist to help you with that, or some sort of, there's a lot of good relationship coaches. That's what we do in my community all the time. We like help each other respond to emails or talking parent things. Getting a co-parenting app, messenger app, is one of the most important things to do. There's a bunch of different ones that you can do. There's like Talking Parents, Our Family Wizard, the Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger, whatever, get them, because those messages are court admissible always. They can't be doctored, and they are time stamped. So that is one of your best sources of documentation. But I think the most important thing that you can do to help your babies is to give them the gift of perspective. Is in your home, you are giving them unconditional love. You are setting some structure and some boundaries that are compassionate. You are allowing them to have a voice in their things, you know, whatever they're interested in. You are giving them a safe place to fall always. And they will feel the difference than going to their other parent's house where love always has strings attached. And they will, as they get older, they will start to feel that. And they will feel less safe there. And so we're just giving our children the gift of perspective of like, I feel this way at mom's house, I feel this way at dad's house. And that is probably the most important thing that you can do for your kids.
That's beautiful. And those are quite a few tangible things that mamas can do. Now, as these kids are growing up and they're realizing their love comes with strings attached, what's the recommendation for there? Because I'm imagining, you guys know I have a 19-year-old and a 5-year-old. And if my 19-year-old, I'm still co-parenting, right? If I feel like that kiddo is being manipulated or emotionally abused, is it teaching them boundaries? Is that kind of the go-to move there? Or what's the thing I can do as a mom? I still hear the having the perspective, right? Having the healthy home, taking care of yourself, having them in therapy, documenting everything, all that still applies. But for the older kiddo who's becoming, I guess the reason why this feels really precious is like, this is when they're becoming their own adult, their own individual, and the worry around how that ex is helping shape and form that. Right? Like,
Yeah.
It's affecting their development of their sense of self. What are some things we can do on our side of the fence to support our kids, or to just be okay with what's possibly happening when it comes to those older kiddos and the manipulation or the emotional abuse?
Yeah, I think having conversations with them and modeling that it is okay to disagree about things. I think it is important, once your children are a certain age, you can share the mistruths that are told about you. So, well, dad says XYZ, and it's like, that's not accurate. You're not going to get into this huge, like, big spiel about how horrible your dad is or anything like that. You're not going to talk trash, because then they're not going to feel that gift of perspective. They're not going to feel that. But you can say, you know, that's actually not accurate. This is what is accurate. And give them, right, that consistency over time of like, dad is saying this and this and this and this, and being able to share when things aren't accurate, and being able to have those open conversations where you're listening. You're not trying to force them any which way. You're just listening, offering your thoughts, and being okay with, you know, having that back and forth, because they know it's not okay with their other parent to have differing opinions. And so it is having that be okay in your world is really helpful. And then also not being shy about what your values are. It's okay to share your values with them and why you value certain things. With those older kids, those are great conversations to have.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And I want to bring it back to, since this is for mommy's mental health here, I want to normalize the rage you might feel, the grief you might feel, right? Like, we have an idea of how relationships are going to go, how marriage is going to go, how families and raising children. We even have ideas about how co-parenting are going to go. And when you find yourself in this tricky situation like this, and sometimes it feels like you have no control over it, I just want to normalize the wide range of normal and big feelings that come forward in that. Mm-hmm. The rage, the grief, the hopelessness, the confusion, the anxiety, the fear. And that's where, mama, you have to double down on taking care of yourself. You need spaces and places for you to process those feelings, for you to move that emotion through your body, separate from your children, separate from your ex, because those are not the places that you're going to get the healing. So take care of yourself and remember who you are and engage in the things that bring you back to who you are underneath these experiences that you're living through, because oftentimes mamas know intuitively what's needed in these situations, but that knowing gets buried in the narcissistic abuse, in the court system, in the information from all the experts of how we should be doing things. So it's really important that we kind of peel layers, plug in, and then strategically align ourselves with advocates and supportive partners to help us navigate what is such a difficult thing to get through. So there has been so many, first of all, just information that you've been able to share with us today. So we are empowered with knowledge, which I think is huge. Lots of tangible things that mamas can do. But just to end, if there was one thing you would want mamas to know who are navigating narcissistic abuse or post-separation abuse or in the family court system, what is the one thing you want listeners to take away from our conversation today that you think will help them?
Yeah, I think, and it sounds cliche, but knowing that you are not alone. They did not create the term gaslighting in Wikipedia because you're the only one, right? Like, so many people are going through this, and the more connected you can be and finding the people that understand what you're going through, that you don't have to defend yourself over and over and over, that can be one of the most healing things for you, right? In order to retrain our nervous system to trust ourselves, to trust other people, we have to give it experiences of safety. And so one of the best ways to do that is finding those safe people that you can put around you that understand, that really try to understand, and can support you on this unfortunately long journey.
That is so helpful. And speaking of safe people, let us know where we can find you and your practice and your work and your resources and the summit that you're getting ready to launch.
Yes.
Because I think that's going to be a really powerful resource for the community. So where can we find you? Where can we work with you and your team?
Yeah, so the community that I run, you can get that on my website at www.risingbeyondpc.com. The summit information and link is on there. Tons of free resources, videos, webinars, all the things are on there because I think it's really important to get that information out. You can find me on like Instagram and LinkedIn. On Instagram, my handle is Rising Beyond PC. Same with on Facebook, Rising Beyond Power and Control. And then my practice, if you are here in Colorado, it is Arvada Therapy Solutions. And that's just arvadatherapysolutions.com. And based on licensing laws and things, we can only work with people in a therapeutic capacity in the state in which we reside or we're licensed. So that kind of limits things, which is actually why I started the Rising Beyond community, is to put people together, other survivors together, and just allowing them kind of a group of safety to heal within, a community of safety.
That's so powerful. And thank you, Sybil, so much for being an advocate for women and mothers and families in this way, and for the important work you do. And you guys do check her out. And because this is a topic that tends to hide in secrecy because of shame, let's do what we can to share this and get this out into the world, because you just never know who's suffering behind closed doors. And I want to bring these hard topics to the table and to life so we can continue to help mamas feel less alone. So thank you, Sybil, for your time and being here and the work you're doing. And mama, if you made it to this part of the podcast, we hope you found something in this conversation that serves you or someone you know and love. Hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your day, and we will see you same time, same place next week. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Unperfected Pod. I hope this episode helped you feel a little less alone and a little more inspired to be you. If you like what we're doing here, I would so appreciate that you subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. If you do, share the episode on Instagram and tag me at BrookeJeanUnperfected to enter to win a 1-to-1 laser coaching session. Also, feel free to join me in my private Facebook community, Mommy's Mental Health Matters, where we continue the conversation. Thanks again for being here, and see you in next week's episode.